Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you. Josh is Severe Weather. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining me. We are going to spend some time here looking at the tropics and what is expected to change here over the next couple of weeks, where we could see our first area that may become more than just a tropical disturbance, maybe even a depression or storm, and where things are expected to begin to increase in activity over the next couple of weeks. But not just whether or not we get a storm, but what is going to change the weather for those of us here in the Southeast and on the Gulf Coast and across the Caribbean. I'm sure you've been hearing now, Florida has been in a significant drought over the last couple of months. It's been hot, it's been dry, record highs have been set. Fortunately, some relief is coming, but unfortunately, it could be a little bit too much. And I'm going to break down kind of where that will be potentially really bad here over the next couple of weeks. We're also going to take a look at where systems have a chance to develop into tropical depressions or storms in the coming weeks. It is June, so the tropics typically aren't super busy or super active just yet, no matter how warm the water is. And a lot of that has to do with the upper level environment for storms to form. But I do think we are heading in the direction of likely to see a system in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to break down where that will happen. We're going to look at the rest of the globe quickly as well. And then we'll finish up with some severe weather prediction here across portions of the Southeast today, as well as the plains and the Midwest as we get into the upcoming week here. So thank you for joining me today. Here is a look at what we're tracking in the tropics. The Central Atlantic Gyre expected to develop over the Yucatan, over Central America, and that has the potential to produce a couple of things here. Number one, rounds of very heavy rain, especially for Central and South Florida as we get through the second part of this week and continue on through the weekend and next week. We need the rain, but by this time next week, I think a lot of you guys are going to be sick of it, to be honest. But not just in Florida, we've got the potential for heavy rains along the Gulf Coast from Texas all the way up to northern Florida, and maybe some heavy rain up through the Carolina coastline as well. So we're going to take a look at that. We also are going to take a look at where development could occur in the Gulf of Mexico. And, from a larger standpoint, the threat for a bigger name storm, a high-end tropical storm or a hurricane right now, despite what you may have been seeing online, does not look very good. What we're probably going to be tracking are more challenging features, more difficult features, maybe just disturbances, mid-level lows, perhaps a depression or a storm after we get past the next 7 days. So we're going to take a look at that. Here's a look at ocean water temperatures, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you guys are very well aware we've got record warmth across much of the Atlantic, and I'm going to kind of annotate that for you guys here. You can see much of the Gulf of Mexico here running very warm, much of the Atlantic running very warm as well. But what you'll notice here is what can be called the Atlantic Nina. This is right along the equator over the last few days. I don't know if I can change this color for you guys or not, but it's going to be green. And what you'll notice is that over the last few days, there's been some significant cooling here in the South Atlantic. What this could end up doing is make things a little bit more difficult to form in the Eastern Atlantic, and instead, we may see things forming closer to land this year than what we've seen over the last couple of seasons, which is not a good thing, by the way. But that's just something I'll be tracking for you guys. I like to watch trends. I don't like to jump too quickly on something that changes in just a few days. We need to see more of an established pattern for something like that to happen, but definitely something interesting to keep an eye on here as we progress here through this, what should be a very busy tropical season. We are in a neutral El Nino La Nina right now. Since basically the beginning of April, temperatures have been pretty close to average around the equatorial Pacific. There was a bit of a spike a few days ago, but we're settling back down. And as we get into June, July, August, September, this is expected to trend negative. Once it goes below half a degree Celsius below that zero mark, we are heading to a La Nina at that point. The lower it gets, the more favorable things could be in the Atlantic for tropical development. I do think we've got several ingredients in play here. We've got warm waters, we've got cooling in the Pacific. Both of those are going to favor more activity as we get into the heart of tropical season here, late July, but especially August, September, and October. So it may not be super busy for about a month or so, but we certainly could see a storm or two. The second half of July on, that's when obviously things are going to be a lot more concerning. Whether or not something develops, by the way, seeing heavy amounts of rain, flooding, that certainly is going to be something that will impact you if you are in the tropics. The Gulf remains very hot, 1.2 degrees Celsius above the average, trending even higher. And that obviously is of concern as well as we continue to heat up the bathwater for what could be a storm that develops very quickly by the time it gets into the Gulf. But here's the good news. From a tropic standpoint, we don't expect to see a named system for the next 7 days. I do think in about a week that could change. I've been saying that for several days, and that will continue to be the case until we see something formed. And that, of course, obviously we start to see things on the map. Nationwide, worldwide, from Zoom Earth here, you can see things aren't super busy. We do have disturbed weather near Central America, which is pretty common this time of the year. We do have an area to keep an eye on near the Philippines. Right now, very disorganized. This area saw a depression turn into a typhoon as it moved away here a few weeks ago. That's what we'll be watching. But worldwide, things are relatively quiet. We've got the monsoon season beginning to kick up in India and also near Southeastern Asia. But we've got a little bit more time to watch those areas. So I'm going to talk now about the Atlantic. Here is a look at what's going on across the Atlantic Basin. And let me pull my highlighter out for you guys here, or actually my smart pen. And you can see we've got just a very, very broad area of thunderstorm activity that is, oh, that's cool. All right, I've never done that before. Very broad area that is getting ready to pick up here. And the reason it hasn't really done anything yet, we have not had a very favorable upper level setup for storms to not only form, but to actually grow and thrive. There's been a lot of wind shear and some sinking in the atmosphere as well. But as we move into the next couple of weeks, that is expected to change. This is kind of a very favorable spot this time of the year for that development. In addition, we've got a front here moving through South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. That's going to push southward here. The two are going to kind of sandwich Florida here with an area that's going to be very active as far as rainfall over the next several days. Looking closer at the Gulf right now, it doesn't look too impressive. In fact, the Gulf is still pretty quiet. You can see kind of southerly flow here, just these clouds that are beginning to drift sort of northward. But we just don't see anything entering the Gulf for the time being. But as that front drops southward here in a couple of days, it's going to sit over very warm water. The Caribbean, a little bit more active, especially in the west. But again, nothing of great concern for the short term. Looking farther out into the Atlantic, it's actually quieted down just a little bit here. Maybe that cooling over the equatorial Atlantic is starting to come into play. However, you can see another wave getting ready to move across from Africa into the eastern Atlantic. And on the Pacific side, again, not super busy. We've got thunderstorm activity blowing off of the west coast here of Central America, but it doesn't look like it's going to organize into anything soon. So then what are we even talking about if there's nothing really out there? Well, things are expected to eventually shift, as you might imagine. And worldwide, we don't see any great threats for anything tropical, but things may pick up around India. We may see more action here over the Central American gyre, and maybe something over the Central Pacific. As we move past this week, we start to see some more favorable action for potential tropical cyclone strikes. And then this is the last week of the month of June, and we see things shifting into the Western Gulf. As we get into July, maybe more action in the Western Pacific. Right now, this is not showing anything on the Atlantic side, but that could shift. Certainly the area to watch, though, is Central America over this week. Next week, maybe the Western Gulf, according to the European. Beyond that, we still have to watch the Western Gulf, and then we may see things slow down just a little bit after that. But again, this is just an anomaly from what you might expect. We may still see action out in this area. This is just to be expected for this time of the year. We'll also start to see things getting a little bit busier here over the main development region of the Atlantic. And I don't know yet what to make of the Carolinas with heating across the central U.S. and eventually that hot air shifting into the mid-Atlantic region, even to the northeast. We do have to watch lowering pressures here near the Outer Banks as the ocean waters continue to warm up. But that's still a little bit of a ways off to get really too aggressive with when it comes to forecasting. Here's a look at the European showing areas that could form and nothing really expected to form. It does show lowering pressure here east of Georgia and Florida. We may have a disturbance off the east coast, but that is expected to pull away from land. Really, the areas to watch are going to be the Western Caribbean and the Central American gyre here. This is this upcoming weekend. And as we head into next week, we start to see some lifting out of the Western Gulf and maybe something to track here over the western half of the Gulf of Mexico. But that's just one model, and this is just an ensemble. This is kind of that probability right now. It's not super high. So no matter what you see online, and even my videos, which kind of try to talk about where something may form, the certainty level is just a little bit too low right now to get too caught up into that. Taking a look at why here, a lot of wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico. This is the end of the week, and we see some westerly wind shear here. There's actually going to be somewhat of a trough that digs down here and interacts with this tropical moisture. Here's this trough right here. You can kind of see it. And what it does is it kicks up the wind shear. Let me see if I can change this color for you guys. I bet you I can. So you see this trough right here, and then you see this wind shear coming through. That's not very favorable for something to move up and actually develop into anything like a stronger tropical storm or hurricane. But it doesn't mean we're not going to see heavy moisture moving into this area. The area that's more favorable for development is down in here, but we don't really have anything to trigger it just yet. Now, as we move on into time here, towards the end of the weekend, and then especially next week, you see some changes coming. That trough lifts away. It actually ends up east of the Bahamas, and you've got ridging moving into the Gulf of Mexico here. Let me circle that for you guys to see at home. And you can see here, this is kind of that upper level ridge in place. This favors more spreading of storms. The wind shear is pretty much relaxed. And what it does is it allows for lowering pressure across the western Gulf of Mexico. So very unlikely a named storm comes through and hits Florida. If anything, we have to watch things more over the western Gulf of Mexico due to the fact that if something does try to go towards Florida, it's going to get hammered with shear out of the north. You see these winds aloft on the backside of the trough next week. Not a favorable setup for Florida to see a tropical system. Doesn't mean we're not going to get heavy rain. In fact, I'm going to show you in just a minute. That is exactly what we're going to be dealing with. Some possible pressures here, and I know we see these brighter colors showing up here. This is next week, showing some lower pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico. We may see some solutions trying to pull something northward towards Louisiana or the Florida Panhandle. But the brighter this color gets, the more spread we see in solutions, the less certainty that we're going to see. That's the European. The GFS, which tends to get aggressive this time of the year, does show lower pressures over the eastern Gulf next weekend, but nothing super defined at this point. As we get beyond that, you can see, generally speaking, things are actually moving from east to west, maybe towards Texas by the time we get to next Monday or Tuesday. And then a lot more spread here. You see darker colors, but those are solutions that are actually a little bit wilder at this point. Not really something we want to rely on too much, but you can see it is showing potential tropical development here later next week over the Northwest Caribbean and some solutions taking it into the central or western Gulf. Less showing towards Florida than Louisiana and Texas, at least for the next couple of weeks. The Canadian Ensemble Prediction System kind of shows a few solutions showing maybe something trying to form here later this weekend. But more than likely, if anything does form, it's heading and turning left towards Louisiana and Texas. And then we have to keep an eye on the Gulf the following week as well. But again, there are lots of uncertainties of what could happen at this point. I will show you the operational models. This is just one solution. I will give you some caution. The GFS loves to spin something up and go nuts with it. You can see it's doing it first on the Pacific side here, southeast of Acapulco. As we get to Friday and Saturday, it's got a quickly developing system. It actually rotates these systems around each other. But one thing to see is that we do have a lot of moisture coming out of the Caribbean. And as quiet as the Gulf looks now, it's going to look a lot messier by the time we get to the weekend here. This particular run from earlier shows something trying to hit Texas. It's not strong, though, fortunately, but showing that moisture increase. And then as we get into next week, it shows something else coming up towards Cuba and Florida. That I wouldn't get too carried away with. I guarantee it's going to look different on the next model run and the one after that. But nonetheless, you can see the breeding ground is beginning to increase here, and the environment for tropical development is looking more favorable here later in the month of June. Here's the more recent run of the GFS, which is just trickling in now, and you'll see it looks different. It doesn't have the strong system here off of the Mexican coast. It does have a weak system, maybe heading up towards Biloxi in a week. Again, that's probably going to change, and it's not anything. It looks like it would develop in anything too strong. As we get later into next week, we see more inflections of moisture trying to move up towards Texas and Louisiana. But until all of that happens, Florida is going to get hammered with all that moisture coming through on the eastern side here. Here's the European. You can see the surge of moisture into Florida here the next several days. Doesn't make it yet into the northern Gulf region until we get later into the weekend, but it is showing something here, showing a weak system, maybe trying to bring and pull moisture up into the western Gulf by the end of next weekend, but more likely something the following week. It does, by the way, show a development of a tropical storm here in the Bay of Campeche, but the moisture makes it all the way up into Texas and southwestern Louisiana. And finally, the Canadian model, which is not always my favorite model. It's trying to develop something here at the surface and pull it across Florida and maybe form a weak system here that pulls away from the Carolinas Thursday night into Friday. But it's also got another system forming in the Gulf. And the GFS, which brought it in the Mississippi, the Canadians trying to bring it up into Mobile Bay here. Again, it's not strong. Whatever forms is probably a disturbance and maybe at worst a depression at this point. But the rain is coming, and I think that's the point I wanted to make for you guys here. Also showing potential development in the Bay of Campeche. So the GFS is kind of on its own here, whereas the Canadian and the European might be the models to watch here for a weak system that comes through Florida and moves offshore, maybe something weak coming towards the northern Gulf, and then later next week, something in the western Gulf of Mexico. So we've got some time here at this point, but the rain is the big story. Take a look at the blend of models. It gets wet here across South Florida later today and tonight. Really picks up tomorrow around the Bay Area, southwestern Florida. And then you'll see this massive feed of moisture by the weekend here, bringing significant rain to the Florida Peninsula. And then that surges northwestward next week towards Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the western portion of Florida, the Panhandle region here. And this is a blend of all the models, but over the next 10 days, indicating the potential to see over 6 inches of rain over the Gulf region here. Lake Charles, Beaumont, New Orleans, Houma, Louisiana. I got to change my colors again on you guys. Sorry about that. Maybe this will help. Maybe not. Let me, here, let's clear that for you guys. But you can see just very heavy amounts of rain making their way into Louisiana, Mississippi, Mobile. A lot of this is going to come next week. This week, a lot of the rain is going to fall in southwestern Florida, and we see potentially well over a foot of rain. Let me zoom in to show you guys Florida here real quick. Moistening up today across the Everglades, then more of a push up the west coast tomorrow morning. And then Wednesday, all of South Florida likely to get wet. Some places wetter than others. Somebody in here could see a foot of rain in just the next 3 days. But generally speaking, 3 to 6 inches of rain. Then it really picks up in southwestern Florida. Naples showing 16 inches of rain over the next 6 days. Tampa Bay showing 8 inches of rain. Even southeast Florida here, even though the moisture is hitting the west coast, you guys are also getting that impact, seeing maybe a foot of rain in Miami-Dade and over 10 inches all the way up to Palm Beach and Indian River counties here. It continues to get wet next week. We see more of it. And I don't think we're going to be talking any kind of drought by the time we get past this weekend. Significant amounts of rain. And again, this is not one model. This is an average of all the models. So it's possibly going to be even worse depending on where you live here. But 20 inches showing up in Naples, 17 in Cape Coral, 13 in Tampa, St. Pete, 4 inches in Jacksonville, 11 inches in Pensacola, 6 in Panama City, 7 in Apalachicola, and 8 in Gulfport, Pascagoula, Biloxi, Mississippi. Over the next 5 days, the official forecast from the National Weather Service shows that 15 to 20 inches in Lee County, 10 to 15 in Charlotte, and 10 to 15 as well in Monroe County and Collier County, 8 to 10 in Broward, Palm Beach. I know I'm not showing far South Florida, but you get the picture here. Significant rain just over the next 5 days is expected. Significant heat over the western United States. It's not as bad as it has been, but still quite toasty here. We have some fog to watch out for in the Tennessee Valley this morning, flooding over the Ozark Plateau, and some flash flooding in intermountain portions of the west. We're going to remain active over the high plains. You can see an upper level low off of the California coast here. Not going to cause any problems for California, but it's going to slow the progress of everything. Trough moving up and over this ridge across Montana. That's going to bring us some more active weather in the Midwest here in a couple of days. We've got a front that's kind of curled across this area, some rough weather early in the morning here in South Carolina. Should move out, but we'll see it activate again later today. And we're going to have to keep an eye on this region of the high plains over the next couple of days. Slight risk for severe weather over the Great Plains. We could see big hail around Denver and Pueblo as well, but a bigger threat farther north over northwestern Nebraska, western South Dakota, eastern Wyoming, maybe eastern Montana, and up into western North Dakota. There's a threat for some tornadoes here this evening. There's also a bigger chance for severe wind. Some of these storms could put down 80, 90 mile an hour wind gusts. We saw over 100 mile an hour wind gusts over far eastern Colorado a couple days ago. So it's certainly going to be rough for some folks here and a threat for some hail as well. This area quiets down tomorrow. We see it shifting into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Right now, just a marginal risk, but that could change. We also have to watch the southern high plains. And then Wednesday into Thursday, we are going to see more active weather here across the upper Midwest, shifting towards the Great Lakes. Maybe a couple tornadoes in this area, but strong winds and hail are certainly going to be on the menu here, unfortunately. And Thursday could be a very active day from Michigan all the way back to Kansas City and Omaha. Heavy rain potential as well, not just today, but take a look at tomorrow. We start to see that flood threat over Florida, and it just continues to sit there. We've got, right now it's showing a slight risk for flooding, but I expect this to get an upgrade by Friday and the weekend over Central and South Florida. The rest of the country, not super wet, but we've got to keep an eye on things in various areas here. Even parts of New England and upstate New York could have a pretty rough Friday and Saturday here. Here's a look at what the European is showing. Active weather over the Great Plains here the next couple of days. We'll have to keep an eye on the upper Midwest here for Wednesday. This is Wednesday afternoon. Iowa, South Dakota as well. We have to keep an eye on things. A big line of storms could move through Wednesday night, the Twin Cities, all the way over to Stevens Point and the UP of Michigan. And then farther south, that moves down towards Chicago and Des Moines late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. But a second wave could form farther south and east. And take a look at this. From Michigan to Nebraska in the afternoon on Thursday, we are likely going to see a pretty significant outbreak of severe weather. More on that to come in future videos, but we definitely have to keep an eye on things across that area. We also have some severe weather expected in the southeast again today. We had some rough weather last night. It's going to shift a little bit farther southeast towards the low country. Here's a look at the forecasted model showing activation around mid-afternoon, Macon over to Charleston, and then shifting southward towards Hilton Head, Beaufort, Statesboro, Albany around 5, 6 o'clock. Could be some big hail down here and some strong winds. And then as we get later into the afternoon and towards evening, that threat moves away with quieter weather expected overnight tonight. Here's a look at the rest of the southeast. You can see this front that's going to be moving its way down into the low country, all the way down south of Interstate 20 this afternoon. As we get to tomorrow, it does move off the coast, and then we see that moisture surge getting ready to hit Florida in the morning, and just multiple waves of heavy rain expected here. We could see incredibly heavy amounts of rain falling here. We could see flash flooding, and this pattern doesn't let up anytime soon. It stays very busy across Florida along and south of our boundary. Well, I appreciate y'all's time today. Lots to talk about as always. Again, my goal here is to help you guys be prepared for everything. The weather's going to do what the weather's going to do, and we can't control any of that. All I can really do is just let you know my take on things and what I consider to be a threat. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, please, if you haven't yet, consider subscribing and invite your friends to do so as well. I appreciate y'all's time today. I thank you. I give all the glory to God, who as a Christian man has given me these gifts to be able to share everything with you. And being a Christian, it does put a lot of burden on me as a believer to go against what the world really wants me to do. But then I remember that it's okay because I'm forgiven for my sins. Romans 3:23 and 24 states that for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. And it's amazing to know that it's not okay to sin, but it's okay to be forgiven. And we've been forgiven if we choose to follow Jesus Christ. He is the answer to everybody's prayer here for all the difficulties that we're going through. We're all falling short. We're all disappointing. And before I became a Christian, I put so much pressure on myself to be better at what I did, to make everybody happy, to be pleasing. But who was I trying to please? Well, it certainly wasn't God, it was others. When I found Jesus Christ and became a saved Christian in 2013, I realized that it's okay that I have sinned. It's not okay to sin, but it's okay that I've sinned only because I've been given the gift of redemption through Jesus Christ, our Savior. When He died on the cross, um, it gave me a new life. It gave me an eternal promise that one day I would be in heaven with Him. And it's okay to love other sinners, not to love the sin, but to love other sinners. And my prayer for you today is no matter what you believe, and I won't judge you because that's not up to me to do, that you are loved and that you can be forgiven of your sins, washed clean, and you can live eternally with Jesus Christ in heaven because God loved us that much, that much. So I pray that you believe what I do, but if you don't, I certainly can't judge you for it. I welcome you to come here. I welcome your faith, but I also know that I am praying for you. So hope you guys have a great Monday. You mean the world to me, and I look forward to doing this again soon. Take care.